Hello there, Joe.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Good morning. Welcome to Masters of Influence. Another round of stories. At least there is plenty for us to chat about, right?
I know, but I'm getting story fatigue.
It's fast and
Oh,
furious. Fast
oh my
and
goodness.
furious. It's pretty interesting. But I think so. This has been a pretty interesting week. So, one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit more in segments here. And so, we're going to start off with just chatting about what we have seen since the last time we met. And the last time we met was a week ago. So much happens, so that's why we have to meet weekly, because otherwise we get so lost with all the stuff that happens. You can't keep track. What did happen this week, which was really interesting to me, is this week felt a little bit like an inflection point in American politics. There's some
Yeah.
really big changes that happened. So we're going to talk a little bit about those. The first one is that Musk is out. So Elon Musk is out of the government.
He's like, peace out.
I predicted 6 weeks. So I was very wrong. Musk was much more successful and longer lasting than I certainly expected. I did
Well,
not
I
think
I
that.
I thought he'd be in for at least 200 days. So 130 days, which is what he made. And the reason why I thought he would be much longer lived than you thought, if you look back at the episode, is that he paid, $250 million for the privilege.
I think the problem was always that he made Trump look a little bit weak, and he couldn't do the things that he said he was going to do. But mostly he made Trump look kind of weak. And I think that to a certain extent Trump's okay with that, because he sees Musk as the alpha because Musk has more money.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it just fell apart, right? Like, he couldn't have.
Yeah. I tell you where I think they fell apart. Wisconsin. That's
Right.
where it fell.
I think when you
If they
put
would have
all of
won Wisconsin, it
w
would be a different ballgame.
yeah, when you put all of your effort and money and reputation behind something and you lose, I think you're absolutely right. I think Trump was willing to suffer the disgrace as long as
As long as he kept putting the
Musk
checkbook
was
out
really
and kept
delivering.
yeah, and kept winning. But then he wasn't winning, right? Because all the waste, fraud, and abuse is just not that rampant. It's, like there is some waste, fraud, and abuse happening. It happens in every system, but it's not trillions of dollars worth. They found 160 billion, which is going to cost 131 billion.
I
I think, you know.
Well, I don't think anybody's actually convinced that they found that money. I think what they did is they spent a lot of time humiliating federal workers. I don't know that they've actually demonstrated that they've saved anything. I think that if
Yeah.
anything, they're probably costing a lot. So I doubt that there's any. I don't think it was ever about savings, though. I don't think that
Yeah.
they actually have a desire or an intention to save. I think it was really just about exercising control.
Yep.
So we had that. And then we had the Senate not passing the Bamboozle Bill. We do have a couple of senators who are very concerned about reelection and think that maybe cutting Medicaid and, interestingly, cutting support for renewable energy funding and all of the money that's going into their states might actually piss off their voters.
Imagine that. Imagine that. It's beyond comprehension sometimes. New technology is here, new processes are happening. They all of a sudden these states are starting to get real money, real jobs, real stuff. And now we want to go back to coal and go
Well,
back to technologies that don't work. The reality on the ground is starting to settle in.
money is coming into the states, and whereas we may have hundreds of jobs or even thousands of jobs in coal, there's tens of thousands of jobs in solar. There are hundreds of thousands of jobs in renewables, right? So the jobs and the investment and the demand, not just from the US, but internationally, is from renewables, not from coal. So these senators are going back and looking at, well, all this money is coming in not to support old things, like nobody wants it. So they're supporting these new things that people do want, and this is really good because it's generating jobs.
It's going to be interesting to see, because what will happen is if they don't support Trump, he's going to come after them. So
But I think this is an
we're going to
interesting
see what.
I think this is an interesting thing because there's a question as to whether or not Trump coming after them is as scary as it was before. The House seats are more gerrymandered, so they're much more secure. But Senate seats are statewide. And I think that it's much more difficult for Trump to wield that power, especially as his approval rating is dropping, in some cases, into the teens, as people see what he's doing is fraudulent, as people are receiving rump watches instead of Trump watches. You know, there is a shift away, and as loud and committed as the House Republicans tend to be, I am not sure that coattails are as strong in the Senate.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
thing is the Court of International Trade. Wait, let me get the real name, because did you know that this court existed?
I did not. I actually saw a thing today. You never get these guys in the press at all. You don't even know they exist, because the things that they deal with is like whether people are paying the right thing, and it's all
Yeah,
administrative
like
stuff.
this is
All of a sudden, they're in the media.
I remember this from back when I was studying economics and international relations, that there was this court, right? But then I completely forgot about it, because when does this court ever surface? Well, apparently it surfaces when the president oversteps his legal bounds. And what was also interesting was this was a unanimous ruling by the court, one of the appointees being a Trump appointee, one of the appointees being, I think, even a Reagan appointee.
Yeah, one's a Reagan appointee, one's a Trump appointee, and the other one's an Obama appointee. But
But it was
yeah,
unanimous, and they were very clear that this is not allowed. Now, an appeals court went and reinstated these tariffs, but reportedly, from what I heard, Europeans were in the negotiating room with Trump, and this is kind of unsubstantiated. So, but Europeans were in the negotiating room. This happened, and that was the end of the negotiations, right? I think that's what we're going to see. Why negotiate with a country if you can't even
yeah,
stand up your own tariffs? If you don't have the authority to negotiate, we're not going to negotiate with you. And I honestly think that
we're gonna
if
let
this
it play
comes to the
out,
Supreme Court, and it will come to the Supreme Court, that it'll be a 7-2 decision, um, agreeing with the Court of International Trade.
man. I think you're right. It will be 7-2, and part of that, he's calling on all these old laws, right? So this was, yeah,
Emergencies.
1977, the Emergency Economic Powers Act. He just doesn't meet the threat criteria, and he's trying everything. That's, in my opinion, that's why he was trying to do the Greenland thing. That's why he declared Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization. He's trying to create a condition under which we're under attack, that he can point to, that he can say, this is why we're doing this.
Well, his fundamental argument is this is about fentanyl, and this is about
Yeah.
a deficit, but a trade deficit. But you can't make how what is the connection between fentanyl and tariffs? That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no real connection, and you can hardly say that the trade deficit is an emergency, since this is something that has been with us for a very long time and is more of an accounting issue than a trade issue.
Yeah.
So anybody who
Yeah.
understands it looks at it and says, "Well, that's really not an emergency." So we've got an emergency that has nothing to do with the topic at hand, and another thing that's not really an emergency. So what are you talking about?
I know.
And
But in the Fox bubble, they just keep pounding on it. And when I say the Fox bubble, I don't mean just Fox. I mean that ecosystem in the MAGA bubble.
yeah.
You can't even reason with anybody, because when you start talking to, I started talking to somebody the other day, and he said to me, "You know what your problem is? You have Trump derangement syndrome." I said, said, you have Trump derangement syndrome. And he said, that's when everything that Trump does is wrong and you can't think outside of the. And I said, dude, the problem is I'm talking to you about factual things and you're saying, no, but Trump is right about this. And it's like, but how? Just explain to me how so that I could understand it.
Well, I think there's some cracks. I think that we're starting to see with some of these changes, with Musk actually criticizing the bill, with the courts are actually heading off the administration as they should at sort of every turn. I think that there was some frustration with the Democrats not taking decisive enough action. But on the other hand, I think that we're seeing sort of the wheels of government, which just aren't that fast, actually do the things that they're supposed to do. What I think is scary, the two things, one of them that you're talking about is just this absolute reinforcement and commitment to the cult, which I think is going to start coming to an end as people start to see how much they're starting to suffer even as Trump is raking in the money. I think that physics is physics and ultimately that's going to hit. But the other thing that I think is scary is the relentless attack on people. There's just this relentless calling of judges treasonous, of threats, of physical violence towards people who disagree with the Trump administration. We had Trump this week releasing murderers and gang members from prison who have
Dude, he's talking about releasing P. Diddy, potentially pardoning. He said it's not off the table,
right and
pardoning
s-
him. Like I can't, like for like he's releasing murderers. He's releasing people that are like just like people that are committing straight up fraud. Like they've been caught, convicted, jailed, and he's like, and but here's what I think about that. What I think about that is that that builds a particular kind of loyalty to
correct,
him.
correct. And that's kind of the scary thing because we're bringing out these people and we're creating a loyalty and we're creating a loyalty in, like you brought up last time, these people were putting on the ice jackets and pretending to be ice. And we heard about this as well with these groups of vigilantes that are going after pedophiles. We're sort of enabling this militia sort of mentality and supporting that. And I think that is scary, that with the calls to violence, with the insults, with what they're saying about judges, to have that be clearly endorsed by the administration. Those are storm clouds on the horizon, which I think are a little bit scary in terms of the future and sort of safety and security in the U.S. Right. So
Yeah.
these are some really interesting developments. We also had the head of ICE retire this week.
Yeah, retire. Yeah, right.
Apparently, Trump is not happy with the speed at which things are happening. But again, you have a physics issue. There are only so many ways that you can do this. It's hard to do. And you have the idea that you're just going to fire people for not being able to counter physics seems to me to be a little bit difficult.
It's like you said, it's physics. They got 1,200 at last count for the month. They want 3,000 a month. And you're not going to make these numbers, but it's the same thing. Even in the big, beautiful bill, there's $800 million for bonuses for ICE agents. That's
I
$42,000 a
didn't
year.
know that.
Just last week. And then last night on Fox News, Stephen Miller kind of answered it.
Under President Trump's leadership, we are looking to set a goal of a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day. And President Trump is going to keep pushing to get that number up higher each and every single day.
To put that quota system in perspective, in the first 100 days of Trump's new term, just the first 100 days, ICE averaged 665 arrests a day. And that means this quota system is pushing ICE agents to arrest 4.5 times more people than their already unbelievable pace. Axios reported yesterday that when Miller announced his quota internally, people at DHS left the meeting feeling their jobs could be in jeopardy if the new targets aren't reached, if they don't arrest more people, that is. Now, beyond how much their arrests upset their communities, there's another thread linking the arrests of Dylan and Carol and Pastor Ambrosio. Dylan was arrested at a courthouse. He showed up for a routine immigration hearing, and ICE was waiting for him, a high school kid. Pastor Ambrosio has done a check-in with immigration agents once a year for the past 10 years without any incident at all. This year when he showed up, he was arrested. And as for Carol, she got a sudden call late last month asking her to drive 3 hours to ICE offices in St. Louis. It kind of felt suspicious, but as she put it, quote, "I didn't want to run. I just wanted to do the right thing." She was arrested and put in jail while she awaits deportation. These stories are unfortunately the new normal. They're not the only ones at all. I mean, all across the country, immigrants are showing up to routine court hearings and check-ins, doing their best to follow the law and try to become citizens legally, only to be arrested, jailed, and slated for deportation. Trump claims his immigration agents are only going after the worst of the worst, hardened criminals. But to get the kind of deportation numbers Trump is aiming for, ICE appears to be arresting anyone they can.
$800
That's
million
crazy.
for bonuses for ICE agents. So that comes out to about $42,000 an agent, right? And what is that bonus for? So it's either that money's either a slush fund for, continuing to push this kind of policy, or it's like, look, I don't care what you have to do, just get these people arrested, and we're going to pay you a bonus based on performance.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's what it's going to be. So, very interesting week in that sense. Let's move on to a couple of the topics. The first one we wanted to talk about was tacos. Tacos. Joe, where do tacos come from?
Dude, I had no idea. I thought tacos just a food from Mexico, but there's actually a really interesting story. There were silver miners in Mexico, and the word taco is actually an Aztec word that means in the middle, middle. So what they were originally, what miners called tacos was, they put gunpowder and made like a dynamite stick, and that's what they used to blow up stuff. And then eventually they started rolling up their meat and frying it, and they called them miners tacos, right?
All this research, and then it turns out that that's absolutely not what we're talking about.
Never what we're
But
talking
but
about,
I think that
but I found out really cool stuff about tacos that I didn't
it's
know.
really cool. I think that and I actually think that there is a parallel, because this idea of a taco being something that explodes, because the tacos this week were the Trump always chickens out conversation, right? Trump always chickens out, and a reporter asked Trump about the taco trades.
He was asked about a term, taco trade, used by a Financial Times columnist. It means, quote, taco stands for Trump always chickens out. Here's part of the exchange.
What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, and then I chicken out. I've never heard that because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation.
So there have been these taco trades in the market because people are trading on whether Trump is going to chicken out or not, and sort of betting on Trump. Like, it's no longer really about the real economics of things. The question is, well, is Trump going to chicken out, or how do we profit on Trump chickening out, right? That's the whole thing. Because every time it comes up against something, Trump, backs off. And the reason I thought it was interesting to relate this back to your research around the evolution of miners is I'm a little concerned that this is going to blow up in our faces, because we're calling Trump a chicken the whole time, and we know that he's very thin-skinned and a chicken. So, it's a bit like, Marty McFly, except that he's actually in power. And you have to wonder if he's like, okay, fine, you think I'm a chicken? Well, then I'm not going to back down anymore. And the only thing that's keeping us alive is the fact that he is backing down. So maybe we should not let this particular taco explode in our face, and we should just shh. Don't mention it, Okay, just do your taco trade. We all know it's happening, but maybe mentioning it in a press conference isn't a good idea because that like tells Trump what's going on and then he might do things that are irrational. Well, no, like more irrational and that could be really bad. So just shh, no more tacos.
Stop talking tacos, but they're not.
Stop talking
They're not.
tacos,
They're gonna.
but they're
They're gonna
really
get.
good. So so I think we can go back to instead of the dangerous tacos that are going to explode in your face, get a tortilla. You can get some carnitas at Costco. By the way, they're
Oh,
very good, the Costco carnitas. As a Mexican
seriously.
family,
Yeah.
I can tell you we've had many carnitas, and the ones from Costco are very good. So you take the carnitas and you put them on a tortilla. Please, none of these flour tortillas, folks. That's just not okay. So you put them on a nice corn tortilla that you fried a little bit, get it nice and hot, and then you put the carnitas on it. You put some chopped onions, a little bit of cilantro, and then you take lime and put it on the top, and then you can roll it up and you can eat it and be very, very happy that Trump is chickening out and that you can make your trades, but you're not saying anything. So it's like a double whammy. You get to have the carnitas tacos and you can count on Trump not actually doing anything. So that's like a public service announcement that I thought was really important for us to go through.
It
And I
is.
thought
It
with
is
the
an
taco
important.
recipe, people could actually enjoy tacos on both ends of the spectrum.
They also found out is that the guy from Taco Bell originally had a burger joint, and then there was this Mexican restaurant that opened across the street from him, and he started spying on them, and that's how he got the taco recipe, and that's how he opened the first Taco Bell. I had no
Great.
idea.
So you're
Yeah,
telling me that Taco Bell is founded on stolen IP, right?
it's stole from the
This just
Mexicans,
fits in well with the
and
America of
and
today.
and and then the guy gets credit for inventing tacos, like he's the guy that invented tacos.
I assure you, he is not the guy who invented tacos.
It was miners. It was miners.
But the Mexicans have been eating tacos for a really long time too.
Yeah.
So now, the next topic that we wanted to bring up today was the US losing scientific preeminence. And I wanted to bring this back to something that we were talking about a moment ago in terms of kicking out immigrants and ICE wanting to kick out more immigrants. The interesting thing is that the US has forever profited from all kinds of immigration. It doesn't matter, legal, illegal, whatever you want to call it, it's
It's where the
always
Albert
benefited us.
Einstein is where the Albert Einsteins and Nikola Tesla and
And it's
everybody,
just
the guy
well, and even
everybody.
people you don't know, right? Because
Yeah.
the brain drain that everybody was worried about. The liberal concern is, oh, we are draining all of the smart people away from the rest of the world, right? Has been traditionally the liberal concern. How do we support the rest of the world since all of the brains are coming to the US, since we are attracting all of the smart people, and that has established the US as the preeminent place for science, for technology, for innovation. This is where you want to come to develop these things. The smartest people get to come to the US, and that
Mhm.
has really benefited us in economic terms, in social terms, in lots of different ways. And we can argue about whether the spoils of that have been distributed appropriately, but that's a different story. Economic growth has been driven largely by our innovation drive to be the preeminent science
Yeah.
source. And we have now, interestingly, thrown that away as we start to tell international students they can't come to the US. And that's Harvard in particular, but lots
No,
of,
they're blatantly attacking academia across the board.
across the board, we're telling the
Harvard is
Chinese they
yeah,
can't come in. We're telling right.
yeah,
So we're making a big effort to do this. We are unfunding scientific research, right, or defunding. We're defunding scientific research, and there is a really interesting article in the Times just today on May 31st around how world scientists are looking to go to other places and build capability in, Australia, Austria, Japan.
Australia has been lobbying for this for a bit. So they started a while ago because they could kind of see it coming. So if you wanted to do AI development, they would fund all kinds of stuff. China said, we will pay for your labs, we will pay for all the research. If you come here and do research, we'll pay for everything.
Sure,
So
but don't do it in China, folks. Go to
no,
Australia, go to
yeah,
Canada. Toronto is a hotbed.
yes,
Because if you go
yeah.
to China, they're just going to steal everything that you do. They're going to listen in, so don't do it in China. But Australia, Austria, Japan. I think Japan would be a great place. Are building these technical centers, and they are investing in this and taking the science away from the U.S. And at the same time, the same week, Levitt comes out and says, we need more plumbers and fewer LGBTQ graduates from Harvard. I assume she meant she doesn't actually talk about the, whether people are gay or not, but I think what she means is
Mhm.
fewer people studying social science, fewer people studying some of these scientific things. So what we
Yeah.
need are more trades. We need more plumbers. And it's so interesting. By the way, I fully support, and I'm sure you do too, supporting people who want to go into the trades. I do think we should have plumbing programs.
Absolutely.
I do think we should support people who want to become
Absolutely.
electricians. I think it's a
Absolutely.
great
We
profession.
can't.
I 100% support programs that help people get into the trades.
But not at the cost of research, not at the cost of scientists, not at the cost of academia, not at the cost of losing not just a competitive edge, but the ability to think through complex problems that long term
Solve
solve
problems, like we were
problems.
talking about in
Yeah,
our last episode, but as well that are high value jobs. Like you can make a
yeah,
really good living as a plumber, but there's a limit to how much money you're going to make as a
yeah.
plumber just because of geography, and there's certain things. And but the country really benefits from some of these really high value think tanks and scientific things that we can sell for lots of money over a long period of time that eventually end up increasing demand for things like plumbing, that increasingly develop technologies that are going to improve trades and things like plumbing, right? So like everybody kind of benefits from this. And what the administration seems to be saying is that we want to trade out of high value jobs and into lower value jobs.
Well, there's this piece, right, where it doesn't make a lot of sense. Yet, when you look at those lower income folks that are thinking about this, there isn't real money to go into trade schools right now that's available. So it's very costly to go into trade schools right now. If you're going to go into electrical, you're going to go into plumbing, which you can make a lot of money at. I mean, you can make $200 an hour as a plumber, right? It's like really crazy right now.
This is pretty young.
But the other piece is that the cost of education is so high for those higher value jobs.
Point.
That's that's how they attack it. I can keep control of you because you won't be thinking much, rather than me giving you these places where you could really think, and then you can fight the system. So if you
I don't
want
know. I think
control,
that's a little unfair. I think it's a little unfair to say that a plumber can't think. I think it's more about the broader impact. I think when you are a plumber, your impact is a bit more localized. Fixing plumbing is hugely important. It isn't the type of thing that completely changes the world, and that's perfectly okay. I think you make a good point though around the bigger problem is trade schools are expensive, education is expensive. Why not make these things less expensive and invest in trade schools? But what we're doing is not doing that. What we are doing is saying don't get an education.
mm,
And what we are doing is we are trying to say these are the kinds of jobs that we want to have in the economy, and that is called central planning. And this was the problem with the Soviet Union, and the thing that brought down the Soviet Union, and the thing that has always worked from a capitalist standpoint. So this does bring us to our new segment called Jeff Explains Some Stuff. These are names that we spent a long time coming up with. Jeff Explains Some Stuff. The stuff that I want to explain today is the idea of supply and demand. So this is a fundamental piece of how capitalism works. The idea is this. I'm going to put you on the spot, Joe, but what determines price in a free market?
Right? So
Well,
it's,
it's a
the
combination.
value of how much of something I have and how limited it is, whether it's limited or not, and how much people want that thing.
So we can take that
Yeah.
whether the it's limited or not limited, we can call that supply.
Yeah.
So how
Yeah.
much is supplied and how much people want it, we can call that demand. How much people are asking for it. So here's what happens is that as demand increases and supply stays the same, price increases because the good that's being demanded is more scarce. It's harder to get. So the people who are demanding it will bid up the price. Fewer people can now afford it.
Yeah.
And so demand settles itself out at a higher price.
Leads
Now,
to $800 Cabbage Patch Kids.
it's exactly what leads to $800 Cabbage Patch Kids. Now, what happens though when price goes up? So price goes up, demand is high, price goes up. What's the logical next step in the market?
You increase supply.
You increase supply. See
Yeah.
somebody out there, they're making $800 Cabbage Patch Kids, and you're like, well, I have a needle and thread, and I can make really ugly dolls too. So you go out and you start making like Cabbage Patchy Kids or whatever the next thing
Yeah.
is. Or you somehow copy this thing, or maybe the Hasbro,
Well, I
whoever
make Beanie
creates
Babies. I make
or you
Beanie
make
Babies.
Beanie Babies. And Beanie Babies is a good example, by the way, of a substitute. So, but the idea is let's just keep it simple with supply and demand. So what happens is demand goes up, price goes up, and so supply increases. Now, what happens when supply increases to the price?
Price goes down.
Now there's more availability of the good, and at a given demand, then the price has to come down so that you bring people back into the market so that they buy things. And then it sort of evens out at a place that we would call a market equilibrium. Now, we have enough plumbers. Do you know how I know we have enough plumbers?
All the plumbing is working.
All the plumbing is working at
Yes.
a price that seems to be acceptable to both plumbers and the people buying the plumbing.
The plumbing.
Good with that?
We
So
are.
it means that actually supply and demand of plumbing are probably pretty closely matched. Now, if we increase the supply of plumbers, what's going to happen?
Plumbers are going to make less money.
Plumbers are going to make less money. So if we flood the market with a bunch of plumbers, then all of the plumbers are now going to make less money and be less happy than they were before. And now what you've done is you've said, well, you were going to go study genomics, but we don't do that anymore. So now you're going to be a plumber at a lower price. And guess who is not being happy being a plumber at a lower price? The guy who is going to go study genomics. Because now you have a very unhappy person who could be bringing in more money for the country, driving more economic value, creating more businesses which need more plumbing and increase the demand for plumbing, which would then drive up the price for plumbing and create more of a market for plumbing. But instead of that, we take that person and say, no, now you have to become a plumber, because we've decided that what we really need in this country is more plumbers. So now we have less plumbing, more plumbers. Half the plumbers don't want to be there, and the other half really like plumbing, but there's no money to be made in plumbing anymore. They've just been told this is now their job, and this is what brought down the Soviet Union. And there's a real danger in trying to outsmart supply and demand. When you think of capitalism, when we think of the free market, there are two ways to do stupid. One way to do stupid is to have no rules. Because if you have no rules, it doesn't work. You have to think of it as a game. And so
Yeah.
zero rules is stupid. No regulations means that you don't take care of any of the public goods, and we can talk about what a public good is later, but we don't take care of any of the public goods. You end up destroying the economic engines that drive value, and that's stupid. So you
Yeah.
need rules. But the other way to do stupid is to try and control everything, because when you try and control everything, there is one thing I know for certain about your guess of the future, Joe. Do you know what that
It's
thing is?
wrong.
It's
It's
wrong.
wrong.
It is not going to happen the way you
It's
think
wrong.
it is going to happen. We actually
Whatever it
may
is,
or may not
wrong.
need more plumbers, but the way to know whether we need plumbers is to let the price increase so that people say, plumbing is attractive. I'm going to go become a plumber. And then they go into plumbing, and then the price sort of settles out and everybody's happy. More plumbers. And if you really want more plumbers, then increase economic demand so that people build more buildings. And then when they build more buildings, they're going to need more plumbing, which means that they're going to hire more plumbers, which means that demand for plumbing is going to increase and more people will go into the profession. And this is the thing that we have to keep straight. Have to find that middle ground. This idea of regulation should always be a discussion. It should always be a push and a pull. Oh, we need more rules. No, we need fewer rules. And somehow we have to come out in the middle. But the idea that we would dictate what everything has to be, well, that is a recipe for economic disaster, which we used to call communism. And all these people who are going around talking about, well, these socialists, seem to be full-throatedly embracing the worst part of communism.
Yes.
That's my little rant or explanation
Well,
for today.
and I'll tell you, I've seen a bunch of content creators that are like, in that mega bubble go to like Russia and say, look, everything is perfect here. And this is all, look at how clean the train stations are. And look at how blah, blah, blah. Why isn't it like that in the US? And pushing that narrative like that's a good thing.
I would say we could invest more in cleaner train stations. I don't see why
Oh,
we don't invest more in cleaner train
I
stations. I look at the train stations in Berlin. Well, Paris is a bit iffy, but I even look at the train stations in Barcelona, right? Yeah, we could
yeah,
invest in clean train stations. There's no reason why not, except the fact that we don't want to pay the taxes that we need in order to do that. Because if you think that Russians are not paying a significant amount of taxes in order to support all of these public programs, not just taxes, but all of the fraud payments that they have to do and the bribery and all of the issues that come out of it, you're crazy.
yeah. And that's the thing. It's like I don't think I think that the thinking in the bubble is that that stuff happen like that's the way that it happens without the bribe, the corruption, the increased taxes, that like that we could have free market and have that and not pay taxes and have you can't it doesn't work that way.
You can't have everything. It's like
Yeah,
what they're currently struggling with in the Senate with the Bamboozle Bill is that they are trying desperately to cut Medicaid to give themselves a tax cut without pissing off all of their constituents who are on Medicaid.
that are about to get kicked out of
That are
Medicaid.
about, so it doesn't work. You can't have both sides. That's not the way the world works, ladies and gentlemen. We should have cleaner train stations. We should have better train stations. We should have better infrastructure. We should invest in that.
But
That
how
we
it
pay
works
some
is
taxes.
you got to invest in it. If you don't invest in it, it doesn't
And we
happen.
lots of ways that we could actually save money. Like this idea of all of these false economies that we think about, all of this idea of cutting Medicaid. You're going to cut Medicaid so that people now go to the emergency room, and now we've got all these rules saying, well, they have to be paid for if they're in the emergency room, because we don't want people dying on the street in front of the hospitals. If that's the way we're going, all we're doing by cutting Medicaid is increasing our costs, and we know this. We have proven this. So if we really want to cut costs and we really want to have clean train stations, we have to think about it from a logic and economic perspective, a supply and demand perspective, not a pretend perspective.
Absolutely.
All right, so I think
Yeah.
that wraps it up for Jeff Explains Stuff. All right, so let's move on to our final segment, Joe, where we really want to end with some good news. We have, and I think that this week, I think we both agree that headlines seem to point in an interesting direction. So there is seems to
Yeah.
be a point of
Yeah.
inflection, a point of change,
This to be a little ray of sunshine.
a little ray of sunshine. Right? I think it was really good that this International Trade Court, that there was a unanimous
Absolutely.
opinion. I think that was a really positive thing. It wasn't split. It was very, very clear. And
Yeah.
and so I think we're seeing more and more the courts and the system stand up to the craziness of the Trump regime. And then you had some rays of hope.
Oh, well, yeah. So one of the things I was looking at, this guy he owns a deli in Staten, and what is his name? Hold on, because I actually have it over here. He's a deli manager, Wael Azalwi, and I'm pretty sure that I'm saying that wrong, but he gives kids money for good grades, you know, and so he's in Staten Island. He's had kids come from as far as Pennsylvania to show their report cards to get. I wish we had more of that going on, and we likely do, and it just doesn't get
Well,
reported on. But that is like,
when
it's
we brought
cool.
that up,
Yeah.
it reminded me of a story in California that this woman, I think her name was Tiffany Slayton, and she was found alive in the Sierra Nevada mountains after being missing for about 3 weeks, and in May, just a week or so ago. And the way she stayed alive was that she found her way into a cabin that had been left unlocked in this resort area. It's called Vermilion Valley. And when they interviewed the owner of the cabins, I was sort of expecting him to say, "Well, yeah, oops, we left that thing unlocked. Won't make that mistake again." But he said, "Yeah, I
Yeah.
always leave a couple of these unlocked just in case somebody does get lost, so that
Mm.
they don't die." And I actually thought that was pretty cool, right? I thought that was
Wow.
you know, I thought it was interesting, first of all, that I expected him to like be pissed off that this woman was
Yeah.
found in the cabin, right? And for me, it was very very positive, and really saying, no, we kind of leave these things open a little bit so that if somebody gets lost, they have a place to shelter from the elements. And I thought that was pretty cool. The other thing that I thought was pretty cool was Carol in Missouri. I think I talked to you about Carol, Missouri.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about Cameron,
So
Missouri. I
Carol in
think that's great.
Missouri, she was at this town in Missouri, and the, the so the town was very sort of pro Trump, and they were happy about Trump. And then uh Carol, who was sort of an institution at this restaurant serving waffles, was detained by ICE, and all of a sudden, everybody in the town is very upset, and they want to bring
Upheaval.
Carol
It's
back,
upheaval.
right? Because she's been there for 20 years. She's had these waitressing jobs. Everybody knows her. Everybody loves her.
This is Kennett, Missouri. it may be about as different from New York City as a place can be. While we don't have election results from the city itself, it is the largest city in Dunklin County, which voted for Trump last year by more than a 4-to-1 margin. She would think if anywhere in the country would support Trump's immigration policies, it would be a place like Kennett, Missouri, right? But when this woman, a longtime resident of Kennett, a woman who goes by Carol, a waitress at the local diner, a mother to 3 kids, an active member of the local church, when Carol got arrested by ICE earlier this week, the residents were shocked. One resident telling the New York Times, quote, "I voted for Donald Trump, and so did practically everyone here, but no one voted to deport moms. We were all under the impression we were just getting rid of the gangs, the people who came here in droves."
And this is in Kennett City, Kennett, Kennett City, and it's John's Waffle and Pancake House is where she worked, and so now they're raising money to defend her, and there are even stories of like people teaching her English, and what that sort of brings to me is that's actually the immigrant experience, right? The
Yeah.
actual immigrant experience is that when we are here as individuals, we actually treat each other pretty well. We're excited about each other. We enjoy the multiculturalism. We support each other. There's this whole layer that we've put on top of this, and that around this evilness and these bad things, but it's not
Yeah.
true.
It's
And
not true. It's not
and
true, and it's
and I
it's
think
a
there's this
fraction
this
of a
whole
percent, and it's not. Yeah.
and there's this whole idea of it's going to happen to them and not to us. And I just think it's great that this town is sort of realizing, wait a minute, this is happening to us, and they're rallying behind Carol, and it shows what the real immigration experience was. So for me, that is also a ray of hope. I'm hopeful for Carol, and I'm excited about uh, this town and the realization that immigration just may not be as awful as some people are making it out to be.
It's what immigration, as far as I'm concerned, is what makes the United States amazing and great and awesome.
And it's
Is
it's
that
led to that brain
is
drain we talked about.
yeah.
It has led to economic development, it has led to growth, it has led to innovation, it has led to creativity, and even waffles in Missouri. So on that, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this week, Joe.
That was a great note. I like that. We left off on a good note.
We left off with Carol. I think that's going to be our new thing. We're going to try and end with some positive stuff, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on anything else. So leave us some comments, send us some messages, and maybe we can talk about that next week on Masters of Influence.
No,
On
no,
the
no. I
mental.
think that was brilliant, and I think that we have to keep. This is a conversation we have to get out there and keep bringing to people, because a lot of folks, even a lot of folks that I talk to, really smart folks, don't understand how supply and demand works and the impact that these decisions are going to have long term. So that's it for that
So
section.
then I
Now,
would say we go
I did
ahead.
want to I just had this thought while you were talking about Doge and Elon, right? And so he comes in, and this, I have no factual information or anything remotely close to for what I'm about to say. So everyone out there should know that, okay?
Well, and
And I don't
but
think
go
there's
ahead.
any research out there about what I'm about for what I'm about to say.
Huh?
I don't know, and we won't know. Only time will tell. Only time will tell. But he got in there into all the departments, brought IT folks, and put software on all the servers and did changes in the system to gather data and centralize data, right? And we won't know for a long time what the impact of that is and where that data is going. And
But
that is
but you know
terrifying.
what is what's also interesting about that? What's
It's
also interesting
terrifying.
about that is that that was the intent. However,
all along.
There are many rules in place and actual safeguards in place to keep the data separate. So one of the problems that they came up against were all of these constraints, and a lot of these constraints are built into the systems, and they're built into the systems with these old coding techniques and old systems that nobody understands anymore except all the people that they fired. So I don't even know if they were effective at doing the one thing that they really wanted to do, was centralize all the data and find ways to screw Americans. Like, I don't even know if they could do it because the challenge was too monumental. Like,
Yeah.
it's not something you can do in a month. It's going to take you years to make that work.
And
I
I
think.
think yeah, I think you're right. And I think that what they thought is we're going to go in and we're going to do all this, and because all these systems. But when I ran my technology company, I did some work for the MTA, and they were still using Wang systems. Now Wang went out
Yeah,
of
but I
business in
think that these
1999.
systems in the government, they're using these really old programming languages. It's actually pitiful. I
Yeah.
think if you really want efficiency in the government, you should just invest a lot in tech. Let's get people newer computers so they can actually do things in a rational way.
Yeah.
I just it boggles the mind. So
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country. And because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation, but don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead. To me, that's the nastiest question.
The president was in the Oval Office. He got asked about this comment that viewers might have heard here on the show last night. Ambassador John Bolton actually first brought it up. They were essentially saying that Wall Street is using this term about Trump, saying it is taco, essentially. Trump always chickens out is the term. The president himself was asked about this term today and his thought on it, and he reacted quite angrily.
Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. We have the hottest country in the world right now. 6 months ago, this country was stone cold dead. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation. Don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead. To me, that's the nastiest question.
It wasn't the reporter who came up with that term, but instead it was the Financial Times commentator who joins me now, Robert Armstrong, who came up with this term, taco trade. And it's great to have you here. I mean, what did you make of the president's response to your term?
Well, first, I was sort of knocked over that something that I'd said in my newsletter at the Financial Times to kind of just capture a little aspect of this moment made its way to the White House. But I think the president's response was very telling. The phrase hit a nerve with him because, of course, the facts support the taco thesis, whether it's been on electronics early on, or the high tariffs on China, or the Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs, or most recently the high tariffs on Europe. Trump talks big, blows his trumpet, makes a huge fuss, and before negotiations even begin, before he's even made contact with reality, he backs off. And correspondingly, the markets panic at first, then he backs off and markets bounce right up again. And it's just undeniable that this is part of the pattern of markets and this administration.
So when he says it's just a negotiating tactic, you disagree?
I mean, of course, there's no evidence that starting with these outrageous expectations has bought him anything. And the way you can see that is that he's come down before the other side has it's like he sees the response of the bond market or the stock market, or he sees his popularity ratings, and that's what makes him back off. It's not the Chinese or the Europeans that are that he's won some concessions from. That simply isn't happening.
What's your reaction to this ruling from this court tonight, essentially bringing most of his tariffs and the most impactful ones that they have counted on to virtually a halt?
Well, it's a halt, but this fight will go on. I think that what has been asserted by the court here is simply that the president is only one branch of government. But I wouldn't be sure at all that that message gets through in the White House. So we're going to have more noise, more posturing, more threats, more recriminations. And so this story isn't dead. We've just arrived at a new phase of it.
President Trump was also asked about the unpredictable nature of his on-again, off-again trade war. He was asked about a term, taco trade, used by a Financial Times columnist. It means, quote, taco stands for Trump always chickens out. Here's part of the exchange.
What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, and then I chicken out. I've never heard that because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation.
What do you think, Gretchen?
I think that this may be the first negative nickname that sticks with Trump, actually.
Trump taco?
Yeah, no, but chickening out is the big part of this. Look, in Trump's world, he wants to be the most powerful person in the world, and more importantly, he wants to be the person who can make the best deals. Mm-hmm. If this actually sticks to him, and he actually is chickening out on tariffs, and that becomes a reputation, that's something he won't want to wake up to every morning.
No, what he thinks is, his argument is, look, I make a tough offer, and then they counter, and then I back off, and that's just negotiation. I'm not chickening out, but it certainly got under his skin.
It definitely got under his skin. And look, I mean, he will always come back to the fact that he's making deals, he's negotiating, and this is what he's going to stick to. And good for him for always coming back to his central message. But I do think that this attack is really smart. So leave it to Wall Street to come up with something that is going to stick. I agree with you, because this isn't the big looming threat to democracy. This isn't the thing that gets people so scared and overwhelmed. This is actually something that people can point to and say, actually, is that true? What is he going to do? Is he going to chicken out? It's very similar to when Walz called Vance and other Republicans weird. It's that kind of thing that sticks, that makes a problem solvable, that doesn't make it so overwhelming that you can't deal with it. I think it's a really, really smart attack on him, and I think he at least responded to it in a very, very positive way. I think getting back to his negotiating and his deals and what he always does and what he's known for. But I'm with you, Gretchen. I think it's going to stick.
Out front tonight, taco. So what does TACO stand for? It stands for Trump always chickens out. It is an acronym that today got a lot of talk on Wall Street to describe Trump's tariff behavior. And so, as that was all making the rounds and people are talking about it, Trump's with reporters in the White House, and a reporter asks Trump to his face what he thinks about TACO and tariffs.
Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, and then I chicken out. I've never heard that. We had a dead country. We had a country people didn't think it was going to survive, and you ask a nasty question like that. It's called negotiation.
Or whether the question was nasty or not, the term does come from a place of truth, which is that markets right now see Trump as a president who cries wolf on tariffs. The facts are that Trump has backtracked on the trade war, his own trade war, right, that he started at least 21 times so far. That's according to Forbes. And it's really hard to figure all this out because there's so many ups and downs all over the place. But let's just take China as an example, because on the issue of China, front and center, Trump slaps 145% tariffs on China and was adamant that he would not back down.
Are you open to pulling back your tariffs in order to get China to the negotiating table?
No.
All right, that was a definitive answer. It was very clear, referring to the 145% tariffs on China. He did not, though, keep that promise. Of course, we all know Trump's 145% tariff was slashed to 30% without any negotiations with China at all.
We're not looking to hurt China. China is being hurt very badly.
He didn't get anything in return from China as of yet. But what he did get each and every time he backed down or flip-flopped on tariffs, whether it was Europe or Vietnam or you name it, was a boost in markets, which is why Wall Street talks about it and may explain their nickname taco. And I'm sorry, we couldn't resist this. You got to have some humor. It's not the sort of taco that he likes, which of course is a taco bowl seen here from a post on Cinco de Mayo. So we know he's a taco eater, but doesn't like to be called one.
That was the scene at the Tweed Courthouse in Lower Manhattan tonight, as the United Federation of Teachers joined state and local officials in protesting for the release of this Bronx high schooler named Dylan. Dylan is an asylum-seeking migrant from Venezuela. He goes to a school called Ellis Prep in the Bronx and works as a delivery driver to help support his family. And last week, he became the first New York City public school student to be arrested by ICE since Trump's second term began. All week, we've seen protest after protest for his release. And last night, 23 people were arrested at a protest marking 1 week since Dylan's arrest. You can see the footage there. The people of New York are clearly outraged, and they're not even the only ones. I mean, this is Kennett, Missouri. It may be about as different from New York City as a place can be. While we don't have election results from the city itself, it is the largest city in Dunklin County, which voted for Trump last year by more than a 4-to-1 margin. So you would think if anywhere in the country would support Trump's immigration policies, it would be a place like Kennett, Missouri, right? But when this woman, a longtime resident of Kennett, a woman who goes by Carol, a waitress at the local diner, a mother to 3 kids, an active member of the local church, when Carol got arrested by ICE earlier this week, the residents were shocked. One resident telling the New York Times, quote, "I voted for Donald Trump, and so did practically everyone here, but no one voted to deport moms. We were all under the impression we were just getting rid of the gangs, the people who came here in droves." This is Carol. The diner that Carol worked at, John's Waffle and Pancake House, is normally closed on Tuesdays, but last Tuesday they stayed open. They called it Carol Day. The staff and their families wore shirts that read, "Bring Carol home." You can see them right there in the photos. All of the proceeds from every single meal that day went to a fundraiser for Carol. They filled every seat and raised nearly $8 grand that way. But get this, there were more people who wanted to help than the diner even had seats. So they put out a donation box for people who couldn't get a seat in the diner, and they raised nearly another 12 grand that way. On every table between the jelly packets and the ketchup was a petition to bring Carol home. Hundreds of locals have signed it. Look, the Trump administration is reportedly aiming to deport 1 million people this year. And big numbers like 1 million people, they sound large, but they also sound pretty abstract. They're kind of hard to wrap your head around in terms of what it means. But when someone from your own city, from your own town, becomes one of those 1 million people, it all becomes much more real. This is Murillo Ambrosio. He's a pastor at a local church in a town just south of Tampa, Florida. He was arrested by ICE and slated for deportation just a few weeks ago. His neighbor voted for Trump, but when he heard about what happened to Pastor Ambrosio, he was beside himself. The neighbor said he was hoping Trump would target people without papers or with criminal records. But what he never expected was someone like Pastor Ambrosio to be taken away. He said, quote, you're going to take, a community leader, a pastor, a hardworking man. What did you need, a number that day? Pastor Ambrosio's neighbor posed that question when speaking with NPR just last week. And then last night on Fox News, Stephen Miller kind of answered it.
Under President Trump's leadership, we are looking to set a goal of a minimum of 3,000 arrests for ICE every day, and President Trump is going to keep pushing to get that number up higher each and every single day.
To put that quota system in perspective, in the first 100 days of Trump's new term, just the first 100 days, ICE averaged 665 arrests a day. And that means this quota system is pushing ICE agents to arrest 4.5 times more people than their already unbelievable pace. Axios reported yesterday that when Miller announced his quota internally, people at DHS left the meeting feeling their jobs could be in jeopardy if the new targets aren't reached, if they don't arrest more people, that is. Now, beyond how much their arrests upset their communities, there's another thread linking the arrests of Dylan and Carol and Pastor Ambrosio. Dylan was arrested at a courthouse. He showed up for a routine immigration hearing, and ICE was waiting for him, a high school kid. Pastor Ambrosio has done a check-in with immigration agents once a year for the past 10 years without any incident at all. This year when he showed up, he was arrested. And as for Carol, she got a sudden call late last month asking her to drive 3 hours to ICE offices in St. Louis. It kind of felt suspicious, but as she put it, quote, "I didn't want to run. I just wanted to do the right thing." She was arrested and put in jail while she awaits deportation. These stories are unfortunately the new normal. They're not the only ones at all. I mean, all across the country, immigrants are showing up to routine court hearings and check-ins, doing their best to follow the law and try to become citizens legally, only to be arrested, jailed, and slated for deportation. Trump claims his immigration agents are only going after the worst of the worst, hardened criminals. But to get the kind of deportation numbers Trump is aiming for, ICE appears to be arresting anyone they can. I mean, earlier this week, we got the story of a 4-year-old girl in California. You can see her there with a life-threatening medical condition. The Trump administration has ordered the girl and her family to leave the country, despite her own doctor saying that if her treatment is interrupted, she would die in a matter of days. Today, the Washington Post reported on a 2-year-old American citizen who was deported to Brazil alongside her undocumented parents. Because the 2-year-old girl is not a citizen of Brazil, she has become, quote, all but stateless. Last week, the Supreme Court stripped 350,000 Venezuelan immigrants of their protected immigration status, opening them all up to deportation. And last night, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that the U.S. will aggressively revoke student visas from Chinese students. There are roughly 275,000 Chinese students studying in the U.S. right now. What are the odds one of those Venezuelan immigrants or one of those Chinese students lives in your city or your town? How soon until we all know a Dylan or a Carol or a Pastor Ambrosio from our lives?